right, Pickle. There were some other headlines across the state of Texas this weekend. Some which ended up being true and some which ended up not being true.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what's happening at Texas A&M. If you haven't heard, Texas A&M a couple weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, fired their head coach, Jimbo Fisher.
Yes.
They left it in the capable hands of Elijah Robinson, one of their defensive assistants, to be their interim head coach. They go 1-1 to finish the season, finish the year 7-5. I would say, we talked about when Jimbo Fisher was fired, I would say that 7-5 would be categorized as a disappointing season for Texas A&M.
Yes.
They were a team that was expected to at least kind of go blow for blow with some of the teams at the top of the conference, and they didn't do that. Jimbo Fisher now out of a job, not sure he minds.
No, I don't think so.
So Texas A&M has now made a hire. This came down officially today, that the new head coach of the Texas A&M Aggies will be Mike Elko. Mike Elko is a name that may ring a bell, not just because for the past couple of years he's been the head coach at Duke, but before that he was the defensive coordinator for Jimbo Fisher for his first 4 seasons at the helm. He was, from 2018 to 2022, he was the defensive coordinator for Texas A&M. He came over after a year at Notre Dame, where he put together a really good defense. The couple years before that, he was the defensive coordinator at Wake Forest. He's been a lifetime defensive guy. If you're interested, he did play football at Penn, and he was a safety there. He's a New Jersey guy. Originally. Mike Elko is a name that had been bandied about pretty much immediately as soon as Jimbo Fisher was fired, because he kind of ticks a lot of the boxes now. I would say that when he left in 2021, he did not tick all the boxes, specifically because he'd never been a head coach.
Right.
At any level, anywhere.
Yes.
He'd be a all-time, defensive coordinator, or defensive assistant, I should say. He'd never been a head coach. Now he goes to Duke, and at Duke, he goes 16-9 in 2 seasons, which, taking over for David Cutcliffe, that first year they go 9-4. They win their bowl game, so they go 8-4 in the regular season. Then 7-5 this past year, which at Duke, not bad.
That's a basketball school.
Not bad.
Through basketball school.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty good. But he now has 2 seasons as a head coach under his belt. That is apparently, for the powers that be at Texas A&M, that is enough of proof of concept to make him the head coach. But more importantly, let's not mince words. This is about what he did as defensive coordinator at Texas A&M.
Yes.
This is, in some respects, functionally a souped-up promotion.
Yeah, because had he gone to, he was the Baylor DC forever and did something good, then went to Duke, A&M wouldn't have any ties to him.
No, exactly right. I don't think then he would be the hot name and the clear connection that Texas A&M was making.
There was a familiarity aspect.
There's familiarity because he'd been there for 4 years. And by the way, been pretty darn good as defensive coordinator. He's a guy who's well respected as far as the defensive mind is concerned. It is interesting that this is... What a good question, Greg. This is the first defensive guy that they have hired as their head coach. Francione? I think that might be right. Dennis Francione was a defensive guy. Or no, he was an offensive guy too. He was an offensive coordinator. It's been a minute since they've hired a defensive guy. Jimbo Fisher was an offensive guy. Kevin Sumlin was an offensive guy. Mike Sherman was an offensive guy. Dennis Francione was an offensive guy. It's been a minute since they've hired a defensive guy. But that's obviously where they want to go. If you're looking for just a quick take on Mike Elko, yeah, good job. Like, to me, this was one on the short list of obvious candidates, and it ticks a lot of boxes. I think it is important to make sure that you are, like, I'm interested to see, this is a real test case to see how much the brand of Texas A&M does from a recruiting perspective. Mike Elko was a good recruiter when he was at Texas A&M, but he was not like known as like the recruiting ace. He was a good recruiter, but the whole program was a good recruiter, right? At Duke, he did fine at recruiting for Duke.
Right.
You know what I mean? The idea here from the Texas A&M board and from ostensibly athletic director Ross Bjork is that they believe that, he's shown enough of proof of concept at Duke that we think he can come here and soup up what he was doing at Duke and with these facilities and with these resources, take them to the next level. Because make no mistake, this is like the goal for Texas A&M, while the head coach has changed, has not changed.
Mm-mm.
They expect you to contend for a national championship. And that is the charge for Mike Elko, is to put them in the national championship conversation. Now that gets a little bit easier because you only got to finish in the top 12 now. You got to be one of the 12, got to be in the mix for the 12-team playoff. But for Texas A&M, this is in many respects a bit of an anti-Jimbo hire.
Yes.
This hire probably is closer to, I guess it's closer to someone than it is to Jimbo.
Yeah, which also wasn't great, but
right. It's probably like the parallel is probably Dennis Franchione. As far as now, he had more head coaching experience. He was the head coach at TCU and the head coach at Alabama for a couple of years before he came to Texas A&M. That's probably the closer comparison. But this is, in many respects, a much more standard hire than Jimbo. Mm-hmm. Jimbo was the big splashy hire, like, oh my gosh, like they're splashing cash. We're making serious inroads. This is the guy who's going to take it. Mike Elko would fall more in the category of like, and A&M fans are going to wince when I say this, it's hiring a guy like Steve Sarkisian.
Yep.
Guy who's got some head coaching experience, known as a great coordinator. Bring him in. We think he can take him to the next level. Mm-hmm. It's much more kind of like rote hire. It's not that kind of jazzy, splashy hire that Jimbo Fisher was. Mm-hmm. So, as far as Mike Elko is concerned, initial thoughts, I think you need to make sure you retain Elijah Robinson. Probably make him defensive coordinator, in my opinion. Make him defensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator spot is going to be really interesting.
Yes.
I'm very intrigued to see where they go with the offensive coordinator.
Which is funny because if you're making the Sark comparison again, that's exactly what we said in the opposite fashion from Sark. Offensively makes perfect sense. Who does he hire for defensive coordinator?
This is a guy who is full on defense.
Yes.
Who does he go?
And A&M wants, I'm sure they want him to be full on defense. That's the whole point.
Yeah. I mean, they want him to have a hand in the defensive side, but then to be the CEO. Mm-hmm. I think that part of this, like we've talked about, when you break up with a girl, you go and you date a girl who's exactly the opposite. Mm-hmm. Jimbo Fisher, one of the knocks on him was because he was calling plays, he wasn't a great CEO.
Yes.
I think that they want to, I think promoting Elijah Robinson to be defensive coordinator and then allowing him to be that CEO guy who still has a hand in the defense, which is kind of Saban-esque.
Yes.
I think that's what they're looking for here. Offensive coordinator is now the really interesting question there at A&M. So they land on Mike Elko. That was not the case 48 hours ago. Because Saturday, reports start coming out that Texas A&M is going to hire Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops is the head coach at Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And I think that the idea of hiring Mark Stoops was a little bit more. That's a little bit like. I think that I understand what they're going for here. This is a guy who is at a basketball school in Kentucky, has done good things there, helped build them into perennially a lot better than they were than before he showed up.
By far.
Quite certainly. And the idea would be, if we move him from a place where he can be the king of the castle, right there he's second place to John Calipari forever.
Yes.
Because it's a basketball school. If he comes here, he's the king of the castle, and he can take that 7-5, 8-4 that they usually are, and then go to the moon.
Yes.
So reports start coming out, and our own Mike Craven confirms it, that they're going to hire Mark Stoops. There's too many Stoops. Mark Stoops.
Many Stoops.
And what happens after that, I think, can only be described as a revolt. Because social media lights up, and Aggie social media and Aggie Nation, the Aggie universe, the 12th man awakens and essentially in unison goes, wait, what?
Yep.
We fired Jimbo Fisher and paid him $76 million to go away to hire Kentucky's coach?
Yep.
A guy who's 20 games under 500 in the SEC? Now, I think that is not a fair description of Mark Stoops, in my opinion. I think that you have to consider the circumstances there, and he took over a cellar dweller and turned them into a middle-of-the-pack SEC East team, which is a decent accomplishment.
I was going to say, how actually high is the ceiling there?
Correct.
It's about there.
I think he's reached his ceiling.
Yeah.
With that said,
comparing ceilings is a huge part of making a decision.
Correct. With that said, A&M fans were not having it.
No, they were not.
And they were not happy about this. And by the way, I think there's going to be this notion of like, oh, all these reporters were wrong. Mike Craven was wrong. Like Bruce Feldman, I don't know if Bruce Feldman reported it. Bruce Feldman, Pete Thamel, all these guys were wrong. I'm here to tell you the TikTok of this thing is that it was going to be Mark Stoops. They did not have all the ducks in a row when that got out. It was not a done deal. They heard the outrage, and they backed off. Now, Mark Stoops put out a statement saying, yes, I was contacted, but I just love Big Blue Nation, and I want to stay here.
Yeah, which just gives him more bona fides to his program right now.
What else do you want him to say?
Yeah, there's nothing else
Yes, I was
you
going
can.
to leave, and then they pulled the offer?
Yeah.
Because that's functionally what happened. Is that A&M heard from their from the power brokers, which is not just the fans, but specifically the donors. And they were like, no, absolutely not. We don't want Mark Stoops. He got Greg Schiano'd. Maybe you remember, maybe you're too young to remember, a couple of years ago, when Greg Schiano was going to be the next head coach at Tennessee. He was going to be the next head coach at Tennessee. It was done and dusted. It had basically been announced that he was going to be the next head coach at Tennessee. And then, because he had been connected now, and I'm not saying this is the same thing with Mark Stoops, to be clear. I'm drawing a different comparison. He had been connected to the Penn State scandal, and Tennessee fans were absolutely outraged. Absolutely outraged, and said, no. We don't want Greg Schiano. We want somebody else. They ended up hiring, I believe it was, I think it's Josh Heupel. That's who they have now. They had hired Josh Heupel. This is not the same as that, okay?
No.
Because there was I think more of a moral outrage towards Greg Schiano. Mark Stoops hasn't done anything wrong.
No.
It's just he's not up to the standards that A&M fans wanted. But make no mistake, Aggie fans got A&M to back off hiring Mark Stoops. That's like functionally a part of the public record at this point. And now, what does that say about Ross Bjork? What does that say about the Aggie alignment? What does that say about all those things? That's a topic for another day, and certainly listen to Republic of Football for that. But it is a remarkable story that ends in my opinion, they ended up backing into a good decision.
Yep.
I'm not saying Mark Stoops would have been a bad call. But I think Mike Elko was a much more obvious choice for a lot of reasons.
It just makes you wonder why, like what, I would love to be a fly on the wall and know what the decision was to not go with Elko in the first part.
Yeah.
Like just what was it? And I don't know, but it would be interesting to know. And I don't think anybody will ever officially know, but it'll be interesting to just to hear.
There'll be a book written in 10 years about it. But I don't get it. I thought to me there were two choices. if you couldn't, and there were always people saying, oh, they're going to swing for Ryan Day at Ohio State, or they're going to swing for Dan Lanning at Oregon, right?
Yeah, there was.
I mean, they probably swung.
Yeah.
They probably asked, right?
Yep.
All I'm here to say is that I thought there were two pretty clear options, in my opinion. Three, if you want to include promoting Elijah Robinson, which wouldn't have been the worst idea in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they were Mike Elko or Jeff Traylor. They ended up with Mike Elko. All's well that ends well, but it wasn't without its speed bumps on the way to College Station.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you would like more and to be notified when they come out, go ahead and click that subscribe button right down there. You can also watch Texas Football Today every day live at noon on TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, and right here on YouTube. For more of the best coverage of Texas football in the Lone Star State, go to TexasFootball.com/subscribe.